Listening to kids talk about the world around them can be very endearing. Hearing their innocent stories on how they feel the world works is enough to bring a smile to the listener's face. However, they sometimes say things that are very odd and impossible to explain. On today's episode, we'll be talking about creepy kids and the things they say. A friend of mine had a wonderful baby boy. Other than a few bouts of colic, he was generally a very happy child. As the child got older and started to speak in full sentences, he began telling his parents about someone named Mary. They would ask him questions about Mary, and he would tell them stories about the nice old lady. His focus would soon shift, and he would move on to other subjects. His parents never pressured him to talk about it, but whenever he began to talk about Mary, they would ask more questions. One day, the boy opened up and went into detail. He talked about the place where he used to live before he was born. He said that Mary was very nice to him and she would play with him all the time. He said that they began to walk, and they had to walk for a very, very long time. He said that after the long walk, that's when he came here, but Mary couldn't come. The boy said that she had to stay there because she wasn't ready to come yet, and it made him sad. A few weeks later, the boy was exploring the cupboards and drawers in the house. He ended up finding an old photo album and began to flip through the musty pages of past memories. On one particular page, he stopped flipping with a look of surprise on his face. The boy said, "Hey, where did you get a picture of Mary?" The boy's parents gave each other a quick glance before hurrying over to the child. He was holding a picture of his long-deceased great-grandmother, who was in fact named Mary. She had passed away long before the boy was born, and her name hadn't come up in conversation for many years. Even if she had come up in conversation, she would never be addressed as Mary. She was always affectionately called Nana. The fact that the boy knew her name, could give a detailed description of her, and then pick her out of a photo album of over 100 old photos is nothing short of chilling. The parents still desperately tried to play it off as coincidence and a wild imagination. A few weeks had passed, and the boy hadn't mentioned anything about Mary or where he had come from. The boy's parents never prompted him to talk about it in fear of seeding his thoughts. They thought it was best to let him talk about it whenever he wanted to. One day, they were on a long drive home after a family gathering. It was well after midnight, and the boy was fast asleep in the back seat of the car. The silent car ride home was soon broken by the sound of giggling. The boy's parents glanced into the back seat to see that the boy was wide awake, after he was fast asleep just moments ago. They asked what he was laughing at, and he responded with, "I'm just playing." A few minutes later, the parents then heard him giggle some more, and he was whispering to someone. Or something. The parents asked who the boy was talking to, and he pointed at the empty seat beside him and affectionately said, "Mary!" The parents glanced at each other, as they couldn't help but feel a little creeped out. The boy's mom spoke up and told her son that there was no one in the seat beside him. The boy looked confused and said, "Yes, there is. Mary's there. You can't see her?" The boy's parents tried to keep calm and react to the odd things that their child was saying. They then told their son that it was very late and he should try to get some more sleep. It was at that moment that they felt the color drain from their faces and immediately needed to pull the car to the side of the road. Their son began to sing. He began to sing a lullaby, and not just any lullaby. It was a song that Mary herself had made up and used to sing to her children to put them to sleep. No one had spoken a word of that lullaby for decades before that boy was even born. There was absolutely no possibility for that boy to know the words of that song, and yet he was singing the song as if he had heard it for years. It was at that moment that they knew for a fact that this was more than just a wild imagination, and that the boy's deceased great-grandmother had been coming to visit him. Another friend of mine also had a boy. This boy was about 3 years old and had never said anything creepy in the short amount of time that he had been talking. The boy was very young when his great-grandfather had passed away. Although he did meet him, he was much too young at the time to remember. The boy was only about 3 months old when his great-grandfather had passed away. Shortly after the child turned 3, his loving great-grandmother had also passed away. The day of the funeral came, and there was a brief visitation just before the service started. The parents of the boy decided not to bring him into the visitation room where his great-grandmother's open casket was displayed. Each of the parents took turns outside of the room with the child so that the other could visit with family. It was time for the father to stay outside of the room with his son while the mother went inside the visitation room. The child was curious about the funeral home, but didn't stray too far from his father. At one point, the boy wanted his dad to pick him up and carry him around. Immediately after the man picked up his son, the boy got a large smile on his face and started to wave. The boy was waving at a nearby room. The door to the room was wide open, and the interior was very dimly lit. The man asked his son, "Who are you waving at?" And happily, the boy responded, "Grandpa." He then started to giggle and wave frantically. The boy's father assumed that maybe the child saw someone who looked similar to the boy's grandpa who had passed away. But as he thought about it, he wondered how the boy could even remember what he looked like, since he was such a young age when he passed away. The man decided to walk towards the room so that he could show his son that the person he saw was not his grandpa. As they walked closer to the door, the boy got more and more excited while frantically waving and saying, "Hi, Grandpa! Hi, Grandpa!" The boy and his dad entered the room, and to the father's surprise, the room was completely empty. The boy, however, did not feel that the room was empty. He kept pointing to a distant wall and curiously asking his father, "Where is Grandpa going?" The boy then stopped and looked puzzled. He turned to his father and innocently asked, "Where did Grandpa go?" Not knowing how to respond to his son's question, he answered with, "I have no fucking idea." At that point, the man felt very uneasy. He quickly exited the room with his son, signaling his wife, and handed off the child to her while briefly explaining, "This kid is giving me the creeps." And that is all for today's episode. I'll see you in the next video.